possibly finish all the articles that I've started, because you probably have a lot of projects running at the same time, and it's difficult for you to find gaps in your schedule that you can really dedicate to writing. But writing a paper does not necessarily mean just quote unquote writing. What's happening is that many researchers start writing too soon. They start typing words into a word processor before they have done the work that could save them time. I prepared a table here to visualize this for you. This is just an example. Typically, researchers don't spend any time setting up their writing process, making sure it will go smoothly. There is no story development at the start, no a little outlining. Instead, we start to write immediately. We spend the bulk of our time in writing and editing mode. Creating the figures is also part of the writing process that can be very, very time consuming, especially when we have put a lot of work getting the figure into perfect shape and then get comments from co-authors that mean we have to completely redo them. Writing title, abstract, and cover letter can also take huge amounts of work if you don't follow a framework, because writing those things then require a lot of last-minute tweaking. And then we have to do some proofreading, of course, before we submit our manuscript. Okay, so in this example, we spent something like 300 hours on the whole paper. Maybe that sounds little or a lot to you. Remember, just an example. I think actually, if I tell you this number, chances are you don't actually know how many hours you are spending on writing a paper. So actually, if after this webinar there's only one thing you do, I suggest start tracking the time that it takes you to write a paper. Whenever you sit down to do any task related to writing that paper, start a timer. Now, after using the journal publication formula, the method I'm teaching, this distribution of time will look somewhat differently. If you take just a couple of hours here to set up your process and, as I call, future-proof it, that will be worth a lot of time that you can cut back on throughout the process. Then we invest some time into story development. This usually doesn't even take that long. We just have to do it and know how to do it. We also really focus on getting a good outline for each section. Now, this is where it feels scary, because we have spent almost 20 hours and not really, quote unquote, written, typed any full sentences. There's no word count we can break with. And I think this is one of the reasons why it is so hard to do these three steps. Writing and editing still takes the largest amount of work, but it can take a lot less with all the prep we've done. We save time creating the figures because we don't have to redo any of our work. Coming up with a great title, a really compelling abstract and cover letter is literally a matter of a couple of hours with the journal publication formula, because we've done all the necessary work already in the story development step. We can also cut down on the time proofreading. So in this example, we've spent a lot less time on the whole paper writing process. So starting to write your paper by typing words is like choosing the paint color for your bedroom walls before you've even laid the foundation for the house. It's not about spending more time writing. It's about using your writing sessions more effectively. Before we move on to what the system to writing clear and concise papers efficiently actually is, I want to ask you this. Do you want to get published in high-ranking journals while spending less time on writing than you are now? I see a yes in the chat. I see some yeses in the chat. Great. Otherwise, I could finish here. So let's get going. The only system to write clear and concise papers with a streamlined process is the journal publication formula, which is my system to write papers efficiently that get published in your target journals. And this is how it works. Firstly, we need to streamline the writing process. Then we need to develop the story for our paper. Then we want to make sure we are communicating clearly and concisely. And before we hit submit, we want to kind of package everything for publication. Let's go over each step specifically. So the first part of the journal publication formula is streamlining your writing process. I'm getting questions like these a lot. Anna, how can I make my time and the process of writing a paper? How can I manage my time? and the process of writing a paper? Or how can I make the whole process less hard? And I created an entire system for this. Now, before we dive into this, what happens when we don't rely on a repeatable process when we are writing a paper? Well, the first obvious thing is it will take you longer. There's another problem, though, with not having a reliable process in place. When someone asks you whether you have time to collaborate with them on a research idea they had, or when you're looking to present at a conference or apply for a job, you have no idea how to answer these questions because you don't control the timeline of the paper writing process. So let's go over the streamlined writing process together. Step 1 is to understand what the most efficient workflow to write a paper is. What do we have to do first? What comes next, etc. Then we need to map this process on our calendar so we actually get it done. And of course, it's not enough just to have deadlines or even writing sessions scheduled in your calendar. I'm also going to show you how you can commit to those. Then we will go over how you can integrate your co-authors into the whole writing process. Because what you don't want to do is for a co-author to say you should completely change the flow of your paper after you've written the first draft. And lastly, the best process doesn't work if you don't manage a few things that tend to come up on the psychological side. I'm calling these writing wrenches, things like perfectionism, being afraid of criticism, also called writer's block. Okay, now I want you to meet Katja. She's a disparities researcher at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Katja said she was hooked from the first module. Before enrolling in the Researchers Writing Academy, she would get stuck writing papers because of perfectionism and self-doubt. Now she feels confident to guide her co-authors through the writing process, which made it feel manageable to her. She wrote a paper using the journal publication formula that got published, and that was her first original research, first author paper ever. And then we have Toyosi, who's an associate professor at Duke University Medical Center. She had been writing papers for some time, but she found that the co-writing process with her co-authors is now way more efficient. She could cut down significantly on major edits of already written manuscripts. She, now following the journal publication formula, she engages with co-authors early on in the process of writing a paper, which, as she puts it, avoids surprises and confusion for everyone involved in the process. All right. Second step in the journal publication formula, develop the story of your paper. Because what you do not want to do, never do that, is trying to press your paper into a story sort of as an afterthought. That will likely lead to your story to be inconsistent or not compelling. Because what is happening when your story is inconsistent, unclear, or missing completely? Well, firstly, your readers will have to do more work to contextualize your findings. Secondly, the journal editor will be less likely to understand why your study is needed now. And this means by not developing your story properly, you risk getting your paper rejected. And we all know how that feels, right? I don't know. This GIF always makes me chuckle. All right. So what's the most efficient way to develop a clear and compelling story? Well, we will first master the scientific story framework, which is a no-fluff kind of framework that strips drama theory of everything that we don't need in our paper, focusing on which parts actually matter. The icon I chose here, it's a bit of a spoiler, because the framework I'm going to teach you has a bit of a circular, rather spiral shape. Not the traditional pyramid, in case you know anything about storytelling. All right. Next step, we will define the audience of your story. So who's going to be reading your story? Or in other words, what's the best journal to choose for your particular paper? Then we will be constructing your argument. This is something I think that may sound like something that people in the humanities do. So if you are in the natural sciences, any life field where you don't hear the word argument a lot, let me tell you, this is important. This is important to think about. This is where we choose which results, which data is going to be included in our paper, and in which order are we going to present our data in order to make an argument. Lastly, and that's my favorite step, we are defining what I call the key story elements that outline your story. These are essential, and you'll see why in the next part. All right, before that, I want you to meet Jordan. She's an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina. Jordan posted one day in our members-only community telling us, it was a post that honestly made me cry. She told us she used to question whether she belonged in academia at all. And what brought those tears to my eyes was that when she wrote that through the Researchers Writing Academy, she got so much confidence about her writing that she's now fully committed to her academic career. She stopped applying for other things. She was fully committed. And using the journal publication formula, the time I talked to her, she already got a revise and resubmit, which she really struggled to get before. Now, Maria, PhD candidate at Queen Mary University of London. When Mariah wrote her first article, she didn't enjoy the process. She told me she went through a lot of iterations, and with the help of the journal publication formula, she recently published her second article, which also attracted a lot of media attention. It was featured in Times Magazine, Reuters, and a few other places, and she said she even used the whole scientific storytelling framework to prepare for the interviews with the journalists she was meeting with. She says that while that was all really rewarding to get her second article of her PhD published, to get all this attention in the media for it, she said what was even more important to her is that she now has the confidence in the whole writing process, and that, as she puts it, is life-changing to her. All right, on to step number 3 of the journal publication formula. In this part, we are making sure that we are communicating in a clear and concise way. Because what happens if we aren't able to communicate your research effectively? Well, first of all, your readers are more likely to misunderstand you. That's what we experienced with this reviewer number 2, right? Secondly, if your article is lengthy, bloated, generally unclear, fewer people will read it. You may even end up annoying readers because if they don't find what they were looking for, they're never going to cite you. A consequence of all this is that peer review will be more difficult if it's difficult for your reader to understand what you mean. Now, this is a meme I saw on Twitter a while ago. Made me laugh. Maybe you can relate. All right, so how do we go about communicating our findings clearly and concisely? Well, firstly, we want to outline each section of your paper. And what helps us here are those key story elements that we have defined in the previous step. They are really guiding us how we structure each section of your paper. Then, of course, we also need to know a few things about writing well that don't have anything to do with structure. And we focus on 5 key concepts, which I honestly believe is all you need to make your writing really clear. How do I know this? Because these are the exact 5 things that have come up over and over and over again in the manuscripts from researchers that I've been editing and reviewing over the years, no matter the field. Okay, forgot to click. All right. Third step, of course, we also need to learn how to communicate your results visually. Honestly, this is the part that most researchers underestimate the importance of. How you visualize your data in your figures is honestly almost as important as your writing in the results section. Maybe more important. Finally, you also will be learning strategies to help you edit your own writing effectively, because that is, of course, a bit of a challenge. When we are very familiar with the text that we have written, it's hard to look at it objectively, and it's easy to just never know when to Stop perfecting the writing. Alright, now I want you to meet Egon. He's a PhD student in Germany. Egon used the journal publication formula to restructure and rewrite a manuscript that he had already started to write. He points out how his new draft is now concise, on point, and that his paper tells a story. He also mentioned how the workbook, which course members also will be receiving, has made this writing process really efficient for him because he used the workbook kind of like a checklist, and the workbook actually also contains checklists on different sections of the paper. Alright, Soundarya, medical scientist at the National Health Institute of India. Soundarya was drowning in a writing sea, as she puts it. When she started using the journal publication formula, her writing started to flow. She actually started to enjoy the writing process itself. This really is the best result to me, because this is what's gonna make you write more. She immediately produced 2 papers as soon as she finished the course, says she has never gotten a result like this from any other course she attended ever. Now, we've streamlined the writing process, we've developed the story, we're communicating our results clearly and concisely. Now it's time to package everything for publication. Because the first impression counts. What do readers and the journal editors see first? That's of course the title, the abstract, and for the journal it's also the cover letter. So let's get these right. Because what happens if these 3 parts are unclear or not compelling? Well, the reader will feel bored while reading it, or they may be confused, they might not grasp all the results are important, and conclude that your results are simply not significant enough for the journal you want to submit your paper to. What's the result? Well, regular reader will probably just not click on your paper to read it, right? Will just be like, not for me, not the right paper. But the journal editor, it may actually make them more likely to desk reject your manuscript if the first impression isn't right. Because you really have to imagine what their workflow looks like. They get a lot of manuscripts sent to them in a workday, especially if you work for like one of those top tier journals, so they do not have all the time in the world to assess your paper. So how do we make sure that we leave a good first impression? The secret here really is title, abstract, and cover letter should all tell a story. Sorry, I ruined this dramatic effect. Alright, the great thing here is, what we have already done all the work in the story development step. We can write title, abstract, and cover letter really quickly by just plugging them into templates I'll be giving you. Oh, we also have Gia, an assistant professor at Zucker School of Medicine, US. Because Gia is an assistant professor who more often than not would have an editing nightmare with her co-authors. But since joining the Researchers Writing Academy, she can now write a draft in just 4 weeks. She has already published 1 paper and 2 more are on the way. What to me is almost the best result is that Gia now enjoys writing and seeing a long project turn into a well-written manuscript. And that is my goal for you exactly. Now, Kaspar is a professor in Sweden, and he wasn't quite sure how to get the flow of the writing in his paper right that he wanted to submit to a high-impact journal. I helped him to understand how exactly to present his findings so that his paper told a story, and as a result, the paper got published in one of the top-tier journals in chemistry, the Journal of the American Chemical Society, currently an impact factor of 15 approximately, which is really high for chemistry. Okay, if you take away one thing only from this webinar, I want you to know that you can get published in high-ranking journals without lacking structure in the writing process. The big question now is, how can you apply this framework to your own work and create a standardized process to write publications for high-impact journals? You have the choice. I don't know what it does that. You really have the choice. You can either be Paula, who doesn't feel confident about her writing skills and is slow at getting her papers published, or you can choose to be Ezra, who publishes in a calm and steady way because she's following a meaningful process to write clear and concise papers. It is time for you to stop procrastinating and start publishing. It's time for you to follow a framework that demystifies the process of writing papers for high-ranking journals. And this is what the Researchers Writing Academy was built for, which is now officially open for enrollment. Yay, little confetti cannon. Alright, I want to give you a bird's eye view of what you will get access to. Oh, thanks for all the help. Here's what's included in the Researchers Writing Academy. First of all, of course, the journal publication formula that we've been talking about so much already. That's the entire step-by-step system that speeds up your paper writing, crafts an interesting narrative for your paper, gives you a structured plan of what should go in each section, and helps you to effectively communicate even complicated concepts. This is all taught in 5 modules of an online course. You can watch the video lessons at your own pace whenever you want and as many times as you want. Module 1 covers how to streamline your writing process. Module 2, how to develop the story of your paper. Module 3, how to structure each section. Module 4, how to communicate your findings. And Module 5, how to package your manuscript for successful publication. The second part of the Researchers Writing Academy is ongoing support that we provide as you implement the system. Because you will start doing things differently, writing in a different way than how most researchers approach their writing. We support you to make sure you succeed. We offer group coaching calls, currently twice per month, to which you can bring all your questions or any piece of writing that you would like to get feedback on.